So we have seen various facets of FSTP project. I will try and put it in some context so that it's fairly simple and one can understand. I was requested to give some background about the history of expert systems. We hear that term quite often. Now, what is it really? It all goes back to the science of artificial intelligence. Now, when long back, when computers were invented, they were computers, like in the sense that they were computed. They did mathematical techniques. So, at that time, computation was considered an intelligent activity. I mean, multiplication, a kid who did very well in multiplication was considered very intelligent. But you came up with this machine, that machine could do it in no time. So computers could do things which are very repetitive, simple, and do it fast. Now, I can look at this room and recognize all the faces. Okay. A computer cannot do that. But I can remember only about 200 phone numbers. Computer can remember 200 million phone numbers without any problem. So the key to that is any problem, if you take it, break it down into simple problems, simple components, and each of the component is simple, but it is repeated a million times or repeated a lot of times, such activity the computers could do. So now the key is how to take what is supposedly an intelligent activity and convert it into a problem of this nature. Okay, what do we mean by intelligence? Basically, and the definition of intelligence has evolved as computers have evolved actually. Like I said, in the 1930s and 40s, a person who calculated the orbital velocity of a planet will get a PhD. Today it will be an evening project for a high school student, because that kind of a repetitive activity is not considered intelligent anymore. Mathematical integration problem. A student who does very well in integration 20 years back would have been considered an extremely intelligent student, but today the iPad or in your smartphone, we have this program called Wolfram app that can do integration in no time. So essentially, taking a complex problem and breaking it down into simple but repetitive problems, that is the key to converting an intelligent, so-called intelligent activity into a non-intelligent or repetitive activity. This was the challenge. And this challenge was called the knowledge engineering bottleneck long back. Okay, so essentially, at the advent of computers, it was primarily data and information, and how to take that kind of a computer and add more of reasoning, planning, some things which even today we consider to be intelligent activity. Okay, so the field of artificial intelligence was rooted in trying to make a computer intelligent. Now, the definition of intelligence, as I said, is evolving. Okay. Now, then it so happened that why do we focus on making a computer intelligent per se? That may not be possible. That means you can't have a computer that answers every question in every field of technology. Instead, let's limit it. Let's take one activity and see if we can make a computer intelligent in that activity. That was the origin of what's called expert system. The word expert system it comes from expert. An expert is an expert in, say, diagnostics of aircraft engine. Now, a knowledge engineer would sit with an expert who's a diagnostician for aircraft engines and try to figure out what is his thinking process. Many times, these thinking process is, as Professor Paschke had shown, these are all basic if-then-else rules, like if something, then you do something. I mean, and like a doctor, when you go with a disease, he is doing intuitively that process. But if we can articulate it, if we can make it into repetitive processes, then you can get the computer to do it. Okay? So the whole attempt is to achieve that for a limited field. And that limited field, you can repeat it and do for different fields, and that's how you bring artificial intelligence to practice using a computer. Now, in the FSTP, again, I titled this talk as knowledge representation, the knowledge engineering part. That is a key to any expert system. That was considered to be the bottleneck. Even the simplest problems, how we can represent that information the best way possible, so that a computer can actually act on it. That was considered to be the bottleneck. Same thing, this entire exercise, if you followed it, was an exercise in knowledge representation. Okay, how best to represent invention in an easy way so that a computer can understand it. Now we have to be clear a little bit here. Like whenever we talk about this, the first people have heard about artificial intelligence and expert system, they jump to the conclusion that FSTP is going to be an automated examination system. It is not. It is not. It is just going to make an examiner's life easier or a judge's life easier. You go through this analysis and try to put it in a fashion so that you get what's called a creative height or a pragmatic height. And after that, the examiner can make a decision much easier, or a judge can make a decision easier. Now again, an important aspect of that is not only making a decision, but making a justifiable decision. That is why the decision was made, and you can go back. So the entire knowledge representation is focusing on that. So once you make a decision, you can still go back and find out what is the information that was used and how the decision was arrived at. Okay. So that kind of, should give a little bit of a background on what expert systems and its role in a project like this is. So I'll go through some challenges that are, and then I'll kind of summarize it in simple words, the formal structures that were explained on the board. We had an interview last Friday with an examiner in this technology in the U.S. When we came out feeling really good, because when we explained it in fairly simple terms, not in a very formalistic way, but simple terms, they got it. They understood, okay, this is what we are trying to do. So in a sense, if that can be presented in that way, it is significantly easier to understand and follow. Okay, like I said, knowledge representation is a key to any effort like this. Now, what is knowledge representation? In a sense, our thought process, what I am thinking, no one else will know. It's just between me and God or whatever. No one would know. What you will know is what I represent, what I express as what I'm thinking. Okay, so language and what you express and all that is the key to knowledge representation. And this has been, so how do we know what Aristotle said 2,000 years back? It's because he wrote a few words, he wrote a few things, and we think our understanding of those things are exactly what Aristotle intended. Now, if you ask me what is an elephant, the best way I can do is to actually bring an elephant. Okay. The second best way is to show a picture of that. A third best way is to probably describe it in words. And so essentially we are using knowledge representation as what I call it as a surrogate of reality. Now, entire field of knowledge and how human beings have expanded knowledge is based on that. And how to take, Professor Schindler was mentioning in the morning about how technology today is highly dependent. The model-based technologies where representation is the most important is kind of the predominant technology compared to, say, 50 years back when actual manufacturing, processing, and production technologies were important. And again, for this kind of a knowledge representation, ontologies become important. And like Professor Pashke had mentioned, you have to come up with terms. You have to come up with consistent meanings for what those terms are. Okay, so essentially for knowledge representation, you have to fix a certain ontologies and have a commonality of understanding. And that ontology is again required for expression of what is meant. And again, that is required for reasoning about the expression. Now you have a set of information, bunch of information, and you want to reason about that. You need commonality of understanding. And that is kind of a key requirement for efficient analysis of anything, just like a pattern technology, that becomes quite important. Now, like I said, commonality of understanding is key. And once we have that, you can a consistent use of terminology. That is another key aspect of knowledge representation. Relationship. See, like in that semantic network that Professor Paschke had showed, we are talking about relationship. Once you can take objects, you can look at it as when children learn, they learn nouns first. And then they learn the connection. Like first they learn mommy and milk, okay, those words. Relationship about like mommy, give me milk, that give me part comes a little bit later. So it is very intuitive for us to think about objects first and terms about objects, and then the relationship a little bit later. While in reasoning you need the on the other hand, see, like people who are familiar with computer science know that object-oriented programming came much later than procedural programming. It was actually counterintuitive. I mean, children don't learn X, give me Y, and then learn what is X and Y. They actually learn what is X and Y, and then that give me part comes later. So when in object-oriented programming, you're focusing on terms, and then the relationship of terms come much later. And so is the case in semantic research that you was talking about. Semantic networks, you're establishing relation. Hierarchies. Hierarchies are very, very important. Like, for example, animal, humans, man. And man inherits all the properties of animals, and animals inherit all the, humans, and humans inherit all the properties of animals, and not the other way around. Using computer representation, this can be formalized. Human thinking, we do it intuitively, but we don't use the very rigid form of hierarchies. On the other hand, once you represent information in using the advantages of hierarchy, the representation becomes significantly powerful. So formalizing the part of the relationship and hierarchies is a very key aspect of knowledge representation, and FSTP technology captures really that, like all the elements, predicates, and concepts, that follows that hierarchy, and then the inheritances that follow with the efficient use of hierarchies is kind of inbuilt into that. And again, consistent understanding over time. I mean, that's quite important, because what happens is, see, unlike the people sitting here, I'm an attorney. I prosecute patents. But 10, 15 years back, when this patent is going to be examined by a judge, I'm not going to be around. So what I leave behind is those words. So my understanding of those words. Now that has to be consistent so that even 15 years without my presence, that words are interpreted to be exactly the same way. So the consistency over time. Now, it's a very challenging problem. I mean, people are still fighting and shedding blood and killing over words that are in the Bible. Okay, so some document like that. Constitution comes much later. I mean, U.S. Constitution is only about 200 years old, whereas the Bible is over 2,000 years old. People are fighting and thou shalt not kill. What does that mean? Even today, that meaning is not clear. We don't know who should not kill whom. And that definition, people are killed in war, animals are killed for eating. There are exceptions. But so that the consistent use of the term over a period of time is significantly important. So knowledge representation is a basis and is a key important facet of everything that we are using in this technology. And again, state of practice techniques. The whole thesis that Professor Schindler was talking about in the morning was that, hey, here in the world of computer science and IT, people have been working over these these techniques for over 50 years. On the other hand, the legal system is not using it. It's not that they don't want to use it. Like he says that the Supreme Court justices are actually pushing, people to develop consistency. It's not the demand is there. But for some reason, the advances in these types of technologies are not incorporated into the legal system. And, if you look at just basic section 101, you'll see that it's mechanical or chemical. You have products, you have processes. So that came from a world 200 years back when we didn't have electrical technology at all. We only had machines, we only had soaps and oil. You had in carts, wheels, or chemical processes. So the laws developed just for that. And we are trying to take it and twist it and use it for electrical technologies, and today for model-based technologies like software and all that. So, sorry. Somehow, what we develop and the ontologies and the representation we develop should be able to keep up as technologies develop, and a key consistent representation techniques will facilitate that. Now, if you look at patent claims, okay, it's a very archaic, old-fashioned way of defining a scope of an invention. Unfortunately, we are stuck with that. I mean, today we have multimedia. Why can't we use multimedia based representation of claims? I mean, why? We can have a picture, we can have demos as part of the claim. We can. I mean, those things are possible. Okay, but we still, for whatever legal reasons, it's an old and then that single long sentence, predominant use of natural language. I mean, there are claims where equations are used and all that, but predominantly you try to get a natural language. In fact, when we were writing claims for the FSTP and IES, the difficult part was how to take all the formal representation and convert it into simple English language to put in the claims. And by doing that, we have lost a lot of the precision. It's very difficult to do, taking something that complex and making it into a natural language and still maintaining precision. And again, what that does is interpretation is very subjective. I mean, he would say that we lawyers like it that way. It's our employment guarantee, basically. There's each time it is interpreted. In fact, even among lawyers in a firm, interpretation of a certain term or certain use of term is different. And probably we are inadvertently playing up on that. I mean, like for our own reasons. And when it's subjective, it becomes inconsistent. I mean, there are decisions where in the same court, judges have arrived at different, and all the big cases that he's talking about have very strong dissents. There are, two judges on supporting, one judge is vehemently opposing that decision. So it's because of inconsistent use. And then again, the complete use of second, like he mentions the context-based documents. Those are the secondary sources. Okay, if there is consistency in when you're building the knowledge representation itself, if there is consistency and use of outside sources is put in a very consistent fashion, this itself will take away a lot of the subjectivity. Okay, and again, state of practice knowledge representation techniques are not used in patent claims, as I mentioned. So FSTP is rooted in mathematical innovation science. Now, there's a subtle difference between physical sciences and mathematical sciences. So, physical sciences have to represent reality. So, there is a limitation, in a sense. Conform to nature. Math doesn't have to conform to nature. So, in that sense, patent technology is more like a mathematical science rather than the physical science, because we are talking about patent claims, representation of things that human beings created. So it's much easier to be consistent. because we don't have to respond to nature's vagaries. I mean, these are all paradigms that are created by. And again, like I said, it's a decision support system. It doesn't make a decision. And this is very important because, we are taking this project and trying to get patents on it, trying to help the system. The impression that, we're trying to automate the process of examination is completely incorrect. Unfortunately, people jump to that conclusion. When you see expert system, you think that it kind of replaces a human decision maker. At best, it assists practitioners, judges, lawyers, inventors. It does not make decisions. And also, it's a very good explanation system. Like, defending once a decision is made, you can go back and look at how the decision was arrived at and what are the bases, and that can be well recorded, and one can go back and so knowledge representation in FSTP, it's the key, it's the core of it, and it's the most important. In simple terms, I will explain the process that the learned people here were explaining in more formal. Basically, you start with a bunch of documents. You have your main document, which is the patent you're trying to analyze, and a whole bunch of prior art documents. You start off marking up. So just like it's a very intuitive process, you would mark with a. So you're trying to find a technical teaching in a document. So you mark up the natural language, and mark up the equivalent teaching in the prior art also. Okay, and that's called the reference set. And the what we are trying to do is we are trying to see if the teaching in the reference set anticipates the technical teaching in the main document. That's the exercise that an examiner is trying to. So in this, we formally try to create a pair of your document, the main document, against all the prior art documents. That's what they called it, the PTR. And then you create a data structure to represent in a simple way. I will get to that. Again, you have initially you have the informal descriptions. Okay, about the technical teaching in the informal descriptions are your natural language, the way the author of these documents or the inventor, the way they have, explained it. That's from there we get the formal description. The formal descriptions are using the specific, predicates and properties and all that. Those are the formal way, logical representation of that. So once we get the informal description, and you can jump to the formal description. And the beauty of formal description is it's invariant in the sense that once a formal description is set up, anyone who, it doesn't change, it doesn't have a viewpoint. It is invariant as far as that technical teaching is concerned. So then you would identify, they went into details about what is an element, what is a predicate, what is a concept. It's a hierarchy, and then you identify each of these things. Once you get that, you create what's called, get technically fundamental informal facts converted into technically formal facts, and then what's called the primary facts are basically coming from the Graham. If you know the U.S. patent law basics, Graham factors. Basically, you're trying the teaching and trying to find the appropriate skill of in the prior art, and then trying to find the prior art teaching and find the difference between the two, and see if there are any objective indicia of non-obviousness. So you do all that, and then create what's called an anticipation combination for each teaching. The teaching in the main document, is it anticipated, or is it contradicted, or not anticipated and not contradicts? These three relationships you create. So you create a whole bunch of, this is the matrix that they were trying to show. So basically, in a sense, it's very intuitive. An examiner is doing it without articulating it, and we are trying to formalize it so that it can be done in a very defensive and consistent fashion. Once you do that, then you need what's called the secondary factors. That is creative and semantic fact. That's basically, you have your invention, you have the prior art, this thing. You're trying to concretize a height of the invention. That is how many modifications you have to make from the prior art to reach your invention. And you can then quantify it. That whatever you have quantified can be used as an indicia of how good that invention is or how creative that invention is. And then again, there's some pragmatics come into the play. Because, for whatever reasons, like India doesn't want patents in the field of medicines, let us say, for example. I mean, so you can adjust the height to take care of those kind of pragmatics. Okay, or natural phenomena, abstract idea. There, you want to adjust your height to take care of the fact that we don't want to give importance. It may be a great idea, but for some reason the society has decided that that particular type of innovation we don't want to give importance. So so finally you get at a numerical height. That height can be used, and that can be different for different technologies. I mean, for whatever reason, old technologies, you may want a larger height. And for newer technologies where, so you can play around with that and decide. But bottom line is you have formalized this whole process and come at a numerical quantity which a decision maker can in an ideal world, according to what the professor is propagating, just like you submit an IDS to the patent office, when we submit an application, the inventor has to submit this analysis. Okay, I mean, the examiner could change it. It's not like he has to take that. He could change it. He could come up with another document so that the analysis would change. But it's the onus of the inventor to come up with this type of analysis and in a very quantifiable fashion, find out what is a pragmatic, creative height and the pragmatic height is, and then the decision process becomes easier. Now there are several concepts that the professor brought. I think we got into a fair amount of details. That is compound concept disaggregation. That is, you don't want to have compound concept. Independence of, simplest example. It's evening now. If it's evening, then the sun is in the west. These two are dependent. So if a claim has both these, then you should give only weightage to one of these things because the other one is dependent on that. So the idea is to find you have to use only independent concepts. So then how many concepts are necessary to go from the prior art to and then so that all the contradictions between the prior art teaching and the document that you're trying to evaluate is gone. And with this modification, you have to preserve the integrity of the element, which elements that are in the claim. That if you take care of it and go to the binary level, it automatically happens. If you represent a binary and then if it is consistent, the integrity is preserved. It's usually, if it is not preserved, probably you still have to disaggregate further. That is the. Now, after all this, this is a simple law of innovation based on this terminology that you can live with. Basically, the creativity, inventivity embodied by a non-pathological invention, which is in a document TT0, over some prior art RS, is indicated by the number of independent thoughts indispensably needed for finding TT0 when starting the search for it from the reference set. And that number of steps is invariant over all knowledge representation. It should not be dependent on the knowledge representation, regardless of how. So the orthogonality or whatever is preserved. Okay, that mapping is conformal in that sense. Okay, so this in a nutshell is what the FST project, as I understand it, I have a long way to go, but as the way I understand it now, I know it's an effective summary. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to any of the panelists, we'd be happy to take it. Thank you.